Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hoping you're well. This is Amin Asr from Noor Kids. Now, today we are talking about screens. Now, there's really no way around it. If you are like me, whether it be the cell phone that is always in our hand, whether it be, the mobile devices that we're using, including cell phones, like I mentioned, the TV, Netflix, XYZ, screens are everywhere. But at the same time, we kind of know and have kind of heard that screens aren't good, not just for us, but also for our kids. But at the same time, it's like, what are we supposed to do? So, how much screen time is okay? Why is screen time so bad? And what, as a parent, can we actually do about it? Well, today we are talking about all of these topics. And in order to do that, we have a wonderful guest who's joining us all the way from Alaska. Yeah, you heard me correctly. I said Alaska. Her name is Alice Hanscam. And I have to ask her if I said it right. I'm pretty sure it might be Hanscam. Okay. Alice has spent 40 years working with parents, children, and educators in a whole host of different capacities. She has served in childcare settings. She served as a coach specifically for parents. Even, beginning her career out of undergraduate from Tufts, she focused on child development. Some of the specific things that I want to share with you is that she's actually an author of 2 parenting books. She's raised 2 lovely daughters, has taught preschool, co-directed an infant and toddler center, mentored daycare providers, been a caregiver for many children, taught parent education classes, volunteered in public schools, and a whole host of other amazing things. I'm reading her amazing bio from my phone, but without any further ado, I want to bring Alice to the stage. Hey, Alice, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm
So
glad to be here.
I need to ask, so Alaska,
Yeah.
what is it like to live there?
Oh, wow. Gosh, I grew up in Seattle and moved up here after college, and it's the mountains, it's the wilderness, it's fantastic. We're in Anchorage, and right outside the door is wilderness and bears and moose and porcupine and snowshoe hares, and I love it. And right now, this time of year, we have light all the time practically. It gets, twilighty in the middle of the night, and that's about it. It's very energizing. And then, of course, in the winter, we have the opposite, where it doesn't get very light.
Gosh, and I mean, as you talk about that, it does sound really beautiful. It sounds really picturesque, and
It is
um,
beautiful.
I feel like it's the type of thing that I only see in the movies or read in the books. And so, Alice, I want to start with this question: why is screen time bad?
Well, I don't even want to use the word bad. I think what I want the most is for everyone to get more intentional with screen time and technology. It's not anti-tech, anti-devices, anti-screens. It's really about incorporating them into our lives in as healthy a manner as possible. So, to answer your question directly, in terms of, there's so many areas I could go. In terms of children, and especially younger children, say from birth through elementary school, what inappropriate use of screen time does is it displaces the key things that help children grow well and grow optimally. It displaces the hands-on, sensory and language-rich, relationship-based whole body experiences that children require in order to grow well. Brain development needs the hands-on, sensory and language-rich, relationship-based whole body experiences in order to make all those wonderful neural connections that happen. About 80% of them happen in your brain in the first 3 to 5 years. And anytime screens are used, it's actually displacing an opportunity for that growth.
Hmm.
An area that I have seen impacted dramatically through my parent coaching in my life with screens, and you actually brought it up when you brought up your phone, our use of phones, is that it really, it compromises building healthy relationships, because more often than not, a screen is disconnecting us from our child. Whether we're multitasking, answering the text and answering our child at the same time, or, trying to, as parents, we're juggling a lot often in life. That's just the reality. But when we are too often distracted by screens, we're not able to be fully tuned into what our child needs and be able to answer those needs. And in the early years, that's essential.
I appreciate that. So it's fascinating. What I heard you say, at a high level was kind of three things. I want to pair it back to you. The first thing I heard you say was, look, we're not taking a stance to say, hey, technology is all bad, or like, oh my gosh, screen time is bad. And even that word bad probably has a lot of baggage with it. What you're saying is, no, we should be intentional. We should be thoughtful. This is a decision that you should make with mindfulness, kind of
Mhm.
like food, right? It's not to say, oh my goodness, like pizza is bad or like carbohydrates is bad. No, eat pizza, but be intentional about it. Be mindful about it. Look at it as a tool. The
Mhm.
other two things that I heard you say was that with respect to children, um, especially children as they are growing up, screen time actually does influence their development, the
Mhm.
development of who they are, their brains, and how their brains work. And so it's for that reason that we have to be thoughtful about it. And then the third thing that I heard you say that was really fascinating was that actually screen time affects our kids in a secondary way because it may impact the way we parent.
Oh,
It
yes.
may actually impact our ability to be with our children and give them the attention, the time that they deserve. And I think, gosh, these are all really interesting kind of areas to go down. I want to just spend one more moment to double click on one area, and that is, you have worked with families and have seen a number of kind of maybe case studies or experiences. And so I wonder if you can talk to like real life examples of, if somebody, utilizes screen time unchecked, or their children utilize screen time unchecked, like, and when you say that, like, it can impact their development, or like, who they become, and in the way that they develop, like, what are examples of that?
Okay, help me out by being a little more specific of.
So here's what I believe to be true, and correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if children at a young age use screen time a lot, it can contribute to things like, their ability to stay attentive to things, or
Yep.
maybe it can influence their ability to like maintain relationships with other people as they get older, or maybe it's like they're so stimulated that they always need stimulation, and are no longer able to like enjoy books and other things that like regular people enjoy, or like, I shouldn't say regular people, but like things that we would want to enjoy. Now these are all hypotheses, right?
Mhm.
In the back of my mind, I'm like, I think these things are true, but I guess, like, are those true? Are those like some of like the actual ways that kids can get impacted, or what are some of the ways that kids could get impacted?
Well, I think one of the biggest ways that parents can relate to, whether it's because they're trying to uh, remove the screen because their child's been on it a long time, um, or they're not, and there's been a lot of screen time for that child, an iPad given to them at times so the parent can get something done, or because the child is bored or upset, and that can make a parent feel uncomfortable. So it's easy to give the cell phone with a little something to watch, or an iPad to do something with, to entertain the child, or to soothe the child, or to just, well, occupy the child. What happens is those big feelings that erupt later get bigger. There's more tantrums, there's more button pushing and testing behavior, there's acting out that happens, and parents talk about this a lot. Either they will, for instance, parents have come to coaching because of the behavior of their children. being just, too much for the parent. They're really frustrated. Their child doesn't listen. Their child acts out. Their child is tantruming. When you delve deeper into it, one of the aspects of that can be that they've got too much screen time going. And because that sort of disconnects the relationship between the parent and child, the child is now always struggling with two things. One, to get their needs met with the parent, that connection, as well as the child is not having an opportunity to really learn how to manage their own feelings. They're given a screen to manage. You're driving me nuts. Here's an iPad. What that displaces is the opportunity to move through those big feelings with a parent alongside and learn to control them, to regulate them. So dysregulation is a huge piece to children as a result of too much screen time. That's one thing I can give you. Another little, let me just give you a little concrete. I see this often in the grocery store line. You've got a couple kids in the cart, one sitting in the seat, and who doesn't really matter what the age of the kids are. And the parent is on the cell phone, texting, whatever they're doing on the cell phone. Their attention is here. And their child needs something. Say the child, I've seen this before, how they have at checkout stands, they often have helium balloons hanging up there or something, at certain times of the year. The child is, looking at the really awesome balloon with Winnie the Pooh on it and looking at the mother or the father to share that, to talk about it, right? And the parents hear. So what does the child do? They get a little louder. And the parents, back here. And then the child gets even louder and maybe even start yanking on the balloon. And then what you see the parent do, because we want to, make this upset go away, is either they'll say, stop that, no, no, no. Or maybe they'll say here and just give the balloon. Both of those things are creating a greater disconnect with the child, because what the child needed from the get-go was an opportunity to share about something that they see. And the power of that is amazing, because we need lots of those. We need to be present to those. And prior to cell phones, we often were far more present to those, because it develops the brain. It develops the language, skills, and comprehension. It builds relationships in glorious ways, those little moments, because it's connection. But when it's consistently missed because of this divided attention, that need of a child goes unanswered. And the result of that is more of the bigger feelings and the testing.
Man, I really appreciate what you just shared. And I want to, again, just parrot back a couple of things. I like parroting back because I remember things when I say them, and then also it helps me kind of like get to like, oh, okay, so these are some of the things I heard. I'd say there was, I think, three really critical things that I heard you say. One of the things that I heard you say was that, our kids, it's kind of like a tree, okay? And they're little seedlings that are hopefully going to grow into really big, beautiful trees that bear wonderful fruit. But they're at a young point in time. And during that young point in time, if we make specific decisions, that might influence the way that tree grows up long term. If we, for example, snip off a couple of branches while it might be small, that might actually have a big impact long term. Mm-hmm. And so in the same way, if, for example, our kids need attention, or if our kids are going through something, maybe it is pleasure, maybe it is pain, maybe it is anger, maybe it is sadness, maybe it is fear, and we give screen time as a pacifier instead of actually exploring those feelings with our children, it's kind of like we might be snipping off some of these branches, almost like not allowing them to fully develop or allowing them to fully manifest. And instead, we're just saying, hey, why don't you just go on the screen? Why don't you watch a little bit of Daniel Tiger right now? We'll talk about this later. But it doesn't actually solve the problem. It doesn't actually allow our children to fully express themselves, fully develop. And as a result, it can create more perverse side effects, bigger side effects,
Yes.
more, bigger types of behavior in the future. Is that a part?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
Okay, very good. And then the other thing I heard you say, which was really fascinating, was, um, um, so the result of that is what? Well, the children also need attention. Okay. And so the second thing is, if we are on our phones, and I have done it before, you get a text message, it's like, oh man, this is a good one. I want to make sure that I look at it or something like that. But regardless, um, um, when you do that and are unable to provide that one-on-one quality time, serious and strong connection that our children actually need. Again, back to that plant example, a tree needs like sun to survive, right? If it doesn't get enough of the sunlight, like that tree can kind of wither. In almost a similar way, our kids need attention from us as parents. And if they don't get that attention, well, then maybe they might act out and try to get that attention from us by speaking louder, by yanking harder, by trying to get that attention in other ways. Is that all? Is that also like a fair understanding?
Yes. Yes. And I do want to say add something. And that is that it's, but sometimes parents translate that as, I can't ever be on my phone, right, when I'm with my kids. And that's not the case. What we're really is going back to being mindful and intentional. It's about being present to whatever you're doing rather than divided. Because when we're divided and we're going back and forth, trying to, answer their questions and answer their needs, as well as answer our email and our texts, is we're really communicating to them that, what's on our phone is more important than them. And it communicates a lot of that kind of, you just aren't important, you don't count. So what does communicate that is our full presence, but it can be our full presence to our phone as well. Meaning, you're in that grocery store line, you're somewhere, and that text comes in that you're right, you have to tend to. It's important, and your child needs you at the same time. It's okay and important to say directly to your child, to look at them, say, I hear you. I know you want me to look at the Winnie the Pooh balloon, and I do see the balloon. I need to answer this text, and as soon as I'm done, we're going to talk about Winnie the Pooh and the balloon.
I really appreciate that.
Right? And then you go to the phone, and no matter what your child does in that 30 seconds that you're answering, you keep your attention, and then you keep your promise. And you give them your full attention. I'm done with my text. Thank you for waiting. Look at Winnie the Pooh.
I really appreciate that. And I think, by the way, that form of, I think, communication as well, related to screen time, but even in other aspects of life, to say, hey, I heard you.
Oh, yeah.
This is, I have to go upstairs to get this. And then, oh, by the way, Kothar, like, yes, I know you want to work on the art project. I have to finish dinner. Once I finish dinner, then I will help you with that. Right. So, that form of communication, I absolutely appreciate. Now, I want to double click a little bit more here. And by the way, I just want to personally reflect myself for a moment. You talked about being in Anchorage, Alaska. Okay. My dream right now, and I pray and I hope that someday I'm blessed with the opportunity, is I want to get a cabin. And the reason why I want to get a cabin, I live in Minnesota, we have opportunities to get cabins, although they're spendy, but is because it gives time to disconnect. And specifically, I myself, if I truly introspect, I know that when I am connected with my phone, I'm kind of, if I'm being honest, like disconnected with, in some ways, like my spirit. I'm disconnected with the nature and the world around me. I'm disconnected with my thinking and my ability to meditate and reflect and organize my thoughts. And so these are things I say as a 30-something-year-old man in terms of the impact that screen time has on me, right? And I think anyone who is honest, and maybe I have deficiencies and that's why I have a difficult time to connect. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. But assuming my experience is similar to the experience of other people, I think we get it. Now, having said that, like, is there an appropriate amount of screen time that is appropriate for our kids to consume that we should feel like, okay, that is satisfactory? How should we think about that, Alice?
Well, first response is American Academy of Pediatrics for 0 to 2-year-olds, no screen time. And then for those preschool ages, hour a day. Elementary kids, couple of hours a day. Outside of, they always qualify it with the school kids outside of schoolwork stuff.
Oh, got it.
Unfortunately, schools, that's a whole nother subject, with the technology that's creeping in everywhere. So that's the general guidelines. And, it's not something, and then some people just flat, I know plenty of people who just don't even do screens for their kids for many years. Again, it's about being mindful and intentional. What kind of, family life do you envision and do you hope for? What kind of relationships? I mean, you spoke of that long term. That's what this is really about in some ways. Getting a vision of the kind of family life you want, the kind of relationships you relish, and then backing up and making choices today in regards to all aspects of your life that lead you in that direction. And so technology and screen use is a big one. So for us, many years ago, my girls are, 31 and almost 28. We only had television. And in their first couple of years, they didn't watch anything. And then after that, it was a half an hour a day was my limit for them, which some days meant an hour and some days meant nothing. And it was usually Mr. Rogers. That was the typical go-to screen time that they would have when they were young. But if you can come up with that, what do they call it? Family technology plan.
So tell us a little bit about that. I guess maybe what I think about are like best practices, or so now imagine I'm in a situation, I'm a parent, I've got kids, assuming one of them maybe is 6 or 7, I've got a 3-year-old as well. I guess, what are some of the decisions, like if I were to try to find 2 or 3 decisions that I could make, or I guess maybe rules that I could make in my home, what are some of the things that maybe I should think about, or examples of those types of things?
Very first thing is to create both screen-free times and screen-free spaces. So spaces meaning rooms in your house that do not have any devices in. Bedrooms being number one. That is a huge impact on all of us, but especially children, to have any kind of screen in the bedroom. That should be a sacred place. People have different sizes homes and different rooms, but if there's spaces even within a larger room, say your main family living area, maybe there's an area of it that is totally screen free. There's no devices in that space. That's important.
That's fascinating. Now let me ask, for the bedroom thing, the goal is for parents to be congruent too. So does that mean that parents aren't doing screen time in their bedroom as well?
Technically, for the health of all of us, we should not be. They say anything within 2 hours of sleep time dramatically affects the way our brain is able to shut down and get the rest it needs to process everything. And now you can imagine for children, the impact on that one is huge.
Oh man, I can appreciate that. And I guess if we want our kids to grow up with healthy habits, we should try to role model them as well. I think that's a big one. I mean, I know that I would personally benefit from that. I know that we do that in our home. The other place that I think might be valuable for us, now again, every home is a little bit different. We actually have a prayer room. And we have an entire culture around it because of the fact that we pray 5 times a day, and especially in the evening when I'm at home, we'll pray as a family, which is really nice, and the kids get involved, and it's a really great exercise. And I think when I say exercise, I don't mean like exercise in terms of losing
No,
weight. I mean exercise in terms of an activity for us to do as a family. But that also might be a space where we say, okay, that is a screen-free place as well.
absolutely.
That might be really valuable. Now, tell me a little bit about like times of the day when there's no screen time. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is there chunks of time during the day where there are no screens being used. For instance, meal times would be number one. There should be, best way you could do it is not to have any screen within your vision, because unfortunately the way so much of the technology is designed persuasive design, which is meant to draw you back to it. So even a visual thing of a phone over there, even if it's upside down on the counter, will have your brain focusing on it. So the best thing to do is, especially at meal times, is to put all screens away. They're off, they're quiet, they're gone. What that does is it allows you guys to connect in person, in real time, in the here and now. Another screen-free time two screen-free times that would be really beneficial is first thing in the morning when you're first reconnecting, and then in the evening when you're heading towards bed. Get rid of
Gosh,
all those beeps and dings and visual movement, and be focused. I want to expand just a little bit on your prayer room and that time to keep that screen free. A big piece of that time for you guys is to be able to go within. And you talk about an exercise for your family. It's also an exercise. It's an exercise in growing that spiritual connection. And that isn't done with a device. And it's like going to your cabin, to disconnect so you can become more present and mindful. That's what that prayer room does too, but not if you have beeping, dinging
no,
things interrupting that ability to go deep.
I really appreciate that. I just want to call out something that I'm thinking about, Alice. So you said, look, screens in the rooms are probably not a good idea. And I think that absolutely makes a lot of sense. By the way, even as you think about connection with your spouse, so on and so forth, I think that's probably a really great idea to not have screens. And perhaps what it also does is it forces conversation and communication and relationship building, opposed to satisfying ourselves by just watching Netflix or something like that, right? Which is probably, again, a pacifier, even for us adults. Okay. Then while we're eating, now for me, for example, while I'm eating lunch, oftentimes I'm alone. That is a time when I'm catching up on Minnesota Vikings and seeing what's going on the screen. Also, you mentioned right when I get up. Well, right when I get up, one of the first things I do is I look at my phone and say, hey, look, where's Bitcoin at today? Like, what's going on? And so, anyways, the reflection that I'm making here is that I have a lot of room for opportunity, but not just me, probably other people. But I think the more important reflection is what? It's that as we're having this conversation about screen time for our kids, if we legitimately want our kids to grow up in an environment where they are not perhaps plagued by some of the ailments that we discussed earlier,
Mhm.
we probably should look internally first at ourselves.
Well, there you go. you know, so much of the nature of screens is, for us as humans, is very reactive. We turn to it to occupy ourselves. We turn to it for quick answers. We shop on Amazon and get Amazon Prime and delivery the next day, whatever. It's this more, better, sooner, faster, and one of the things that I know it and others have realized too, and I'm sure you have, is that undermined our ability to be patient and take our time. And yet you speak of that cabin and envisioning being out there. What that really represents is your desire to be able to move through life a little slower, be more present, taking your time, because that's where those rich and meaningful connections and relationships happen. Children require us to strengthen our ability to pause, slow down, and take our time, because you can't hurry child development. And you can't hurry a child over his, dinner plate who's a slow eater, who, just very carefully picks at the food. You can't. I mean, you can hurry him, but it's going to be miserable. You can have a miserable child. And so in my experience, what I've seen is that the technology actually interrupts our ability. We're so focused out there on it that we're missing that key piece of that inner growth and that firing from the inside as opposed to out here. And for children, that's devastating. And for relationships, that can be devastating. Being mindful with their screens changes it. You're sitting alone at lunch looking at your Viking score. Cool. There's nobody else. You're not doing it alongside somebody else who's also focused on their phone eating, alone together, side by side, but totally disconnected. You're doing it on your own. That's something I would, that's what I would intentionally do. Here's my time, right? They do talk about, and I can give you some websites or send it to you after the talk here, that talk about, if you're one of the things that can interrupt that ability to really feel calmer and settled and steadier throughout the day is starting your day on your phone, because it gets the whole brain cooking again. So, there's a lot of things to be mindful. I mean, there's screen-free times and spaces, but I also just want to say it's about what you do choose for showing your children. Take care in what you're showing.
You mean like what you decide to show on screens? The
content, right? Is it in alignment with your values? Which your work in Noor Kids, obviously, that's what your whole point is to help strengthen those key values that are really about that inner soul, helping them grow up as a spiritual being, truly connected from the inside out. Does it represent the kinds of relationships, that you hope for your own child?
Right. And role model that behavior.
Yeah. And, to be mindful about screens also means really to focus first on your relationship with your child and connection. And that can include screens. When you FaceTime a loved one, especially with when you're with younger kids, be there with them. So it's this conversation. So there's that hands-on sensory and language rich piece, because you're alongside your child while grandma's on the screen. And then you can also talk about it afterwards and enrich it even more. It's like when my girls would watch Mr. Rogers, who is my all-time favorite for young children, it always went beyond that half hour. We always talked about Mr. Rogers, what he shared and what he made and where he took you, what adventure he went on and what feelings he talked about. It became this wonderful, rich conversation that was just delightful, right? That's quality screen time.
I appreciate that. And I think, for us, I have a unhealthy relationship with Daniel Tiger. I like Daniel Tiger. I think Daniel Tiger is kind of Mr. Rogers. Well, no, I think it's healthy. Okay,
well, you said unhealthy. How could
sorry. No, I guess that was an idiom, right? No, I think I really like Daniel Tiger. My daughter's 3, so I think for her that's when we do screen time, we like Daniel Tiger, because the messages are just so, I think, closely in alignment with the messages that we're hoping for ourselves to role model, whether that is trying new food, or whether that is respecting sleep, or her little baby brother now, so on and so forth. I think that I really appreciate that. And I think one thing that we often talk about to our older kids and also to ourselves is that our senses, our eyes, our ears, our mouth, our hands, these are the inputs into our brain. And so if we put good things in, well, then good things will be able to come out. If we put kind of like bad things in, then, bad things can come out. And so we should be thoughtful about making sure that we put good things into this brain of ours through our senses. That way we're able to do really great things. Now, Alice, with the time that we have, I do want to, I guess, focus on an area that is more personal for me and hopefully valuable for others as well. And that is, okay, so now I've kind of identified that for myself, this is an area of opportunity for me. Do like, as I think about weight loss, um, to go at it cold turkey,
Oh,
is kind of tough, right? Like, how many times do people try and exercise and they're like, okay, I can't do this anymore, right? And so I wonder, like, are there best practices around improving our own relationship with screens? And by the way, you already mentioned being thoughtful about, when we're using it, where we're using, which I think is really good. Are there any other like tips or tricks to like detoxify or to like go on this journey to try to develop a healthier personal relationship with screens and devices?
well, I think the number one thing that comes to mind is that whatever you do to create change for yourself, make it a small step at a time. Like you said, if you suddenly cut yourself off of food, it doesn't work. It might work. You might lose some weight in that, that 2 weeks that you starve yourself. And that might feel good, sort of, but you usually jump right back into overeating. And I see somebody.
Yeah, this is my daughter, Kothar. Hey, salam. Kothi, you want to say salam?
Yeah.
Say salam alaikum.
Salam.
Kothi, we were talking about you earlier. Do you like Daniel Taigi? You do, but you don't watch him too much, do you? You would just watch him a little bit.
Yeah. Only I watch one episode. That's my mom told me I do one episode every day.
Yeah, she gets one episode that she gets to, but then do you also read the Daniel Taigi book?
Yeah.
And how often do you read the Daniel Taigi book?
At night.
Every night before we go to bed. So
And even when it's too late, then we don't read the Daniel Taigi story.
If we're going to bed really, really late, right? Okay, so Kothi, I'm talking to Miss Alice here. Do you think it's okay if I continue talking with her?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Um,
So adorable. Thank you.
Appreciate it. That was not planned. I'm happy that you said one episode a day. I was like, I hope, I don't know if you could say anything. So.
I love it. So yes, taking small steps to create change is what makes real change actually happen. And that's with how we work with our children, is how we work with ourselves to create change. So if you really are feeling like, okay, I need to do something with say my cell phone use, then start with 10 minutes. Maybe it's turning it to silent for 10 more minutes while you finish something else before you go check it. Don't try to turn it off and walk away from it for 3 hours, because it's probably going to drive you nuts. But I had one mama who, she used to always just go walking with her dog and really enjoy it. And then she was part of I guess it was a PTA group for her elementary school, and the PTA started communicating via texts, and then it became texting all the time. And she realized this was not okay anymore. She just didn't want that to happen. So she let them all know that she would receive their texts and she would get back to them when she could. So that was a step she took. Another step she took to help get back to walking her dog without the interruption of the phone. It was really hard for her to leave her phone for half an hour because she was worried, what if the school called and her child was sick? And so we talked about that. They have a school nurse. Your child, the nurse is going to take care of your child. It's once upon a time, like when I was raising my girls, there was no cell phone, right? So when I got home from running my errands, I would have a phone message and, I'd call the school back. So she worked really hard at just starting with smaller walks with her dog by leaving her phone at home. And she said it was really uncomfortable. But after practicing it and strengthening it, she began to relish it. And then what she noticed was that when she did come back and have to respond to something, she felt far more calm and present as a result.
I appreciate that.
Harried and reactive.
Well, and I think, the two reactions I have are, one, I remember when I was a college freshman, I, lost my phone, or if my phone broke, so there was no way to contact me. And for me, as a college freshman who was tough to contact, I actually thought it was kind of cool. It's like, oh, this is great. But as a parent with responsibilities and things like that, I'm like, gosh, if someone needed to contact me, oh no. And I think number two, the other reflection is, as you're talking about, when you were articulating that story, and I wasn't thinking about myself, I was thinking about this lady who you were discussing. I was like, it sounds an awful lot like she's addicted to her phone. And then I was like, probably I'm addicted to my phone too, if I was being honest. And so, but a lot of wisdom, Alice, in this discussion to say, hey, um, do something small that you can do consistently. And it's so interesting that you use that as well, Alice, because when we think about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet of Islam, one of the traditions that is attributed to him that is one that I think people talk about often is that the deeds that God likes the most are not like, staying awake all night and like just working super hard. No, it's the deeds that are done a little bit but consistently. Those are the ones that are most loved, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. The second thing I just want to add to it is, similar to working out, what's fascinating, I think, is the first week is like, oh man, it can feel really tough, but when you work out or when you eat healthy, it actually feels good too. There is a release of endorphins. And again, when we really allow ourselves to listen to ourselves, it genuinely feels good. And so I imagine that when we ourselves begin to try and reduce the amount of screen time and distractions, and perhaps in lieu of that, begin being a little bit more internal or being in that kind of cabin place that I was articulating, I think that there's something really enjoyable in that. And that also can be a kind of carrot to help us on this journey.
Yes. And it can be tough to find those. So something to initially, like you said, it's really hard. And it's like strengthening a muscle. And the more you do those little 10 minutes or those little bits that you're doing, the stronger that muscle gets. And I always encourage parents to start noticing what's different as a result. It may be really small at first. It might be maybe they're using that, say, going back to the 10 minutes off your cell phone or whatever. Maybe they're using that time to sit and read a book with their child, and they read 2 books instead of 1. And what is it that felt good about that, right? And the more you put your attention to what is working for you, where it does feel good, where things are going well, what you can appreciate, the easier it gets to create the change that you want, because you're putting your attention to what you really want more of. And what we focus on grows. So that's a key piece, especially during the hard. You got to really look for what's feeling different, what's going better. Even if you're feeling totally anxious because you've made this step and it's really hard and that anxiety creeps up, you can appreciate the fact that you're anxious. Okay, I'm really feeling anxious about it. Let me just appreciate that feeling and allow it and affirm it, and not try to change it and make it go away.
I really appreciate that. It's fascinating. Man, there's a lot that could be that could be said here.
Oh yeah, we could go on for a long time.
But I do think that we did stumble on something really special here around us looking at internally, and also we talked about, full circle. We talked about kids at the beginning, how sometimes screen time is used as a pacifier for their emotions, and how that can kind of be crippling long term. And where we just landed is perhaps sometimes we use screen time ourselves to pacify our own emotions and our own feelings, and as a result we don't actually allow ourselves to fully explore them. And I think there's a lot of real wisdom in that, and I think there's a lot of really value here, and I hope families benefited from this. Now, Alice, if people wanted to learn more or gain additional resources, are there any places you could direct them to?
Absolutely. The Screen Time Network that you're familiar with is
absolutely. I had the opportunity to participate as well. What is the website there, by the way?
It is I think screentimenetwork.org.
Or you could just Google it, or you could just
Yeah,
Google
it's
it.
the Children's Screen Time Action Network, but they go by the screentimenetwork.org, I believe. Another website to go look at, and it's also on Facebook, is Protect Young Eyes. That's a fabulous one. You can Google that. And then a link that I was just given yesterday from the Screen Time Network that is absolutely fantastic. I've already shared it with other people. It's the Center for Humane Technology, and I wrote down the website. It's ledger, LEDGER .humanetech.com. It's got a well laid out information in different areas of our life, social, emotional, physical, and the impact of screens, which helps you clarify what's important. Those are three. May I also share my work?
Please, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so you had mentioned 2 books. I'm actually an author of 3 books, and they're actually all resources for parents, as well as my own website and blog. So you can get to all that through my website of DenaliParentCoaching.com.
And how do you spell that?
Denali, DENALI. It's the name of our mountain up here.
Okay.
My first book is the coaching model that is really all about helping parents to create that positive change in their life and in their relationships. And it was such a powerful coaching has been so powerful working with parents that I ended up putting into book form. And that's the Parenting Inspired book. It's my first book. It's a journaling book. It's all about helping parents to
finding grace in chaos. Gosh, I feel like that is the life that we are living right now.
Yeah, it's actually always a life when you have children. From that book, and a lot of what we just talked about is probably the most impactful thing for parents that they work at strengthening. That's the ability to create that pause, whether it's in heated moments or taking it deeper and growing that inner self. So this is all about leading with calm connection. Wow. And it's also a journaling book. And they both follow, family stories and my work and etc. My third book is a collection of a lot of my writing, articles, pieces, and new things, index, with an index, a clear index, so people can find what they need. It's Parenting Through Relationship, ideas and inspiration to help you be the parent you want to be.
So if families want to purchase these, is this an Amazon situation, or do they get it from your website?
It's totally, my website leads you to Amazon. It's Amazon. And actually I'm opening up an Etsy store in the United States, and I'll sell them through that too. And that should happen soon, but they're on Amazon, and that would
be absolutely. And what we'll go ahead and do is, so for these 3 books specifically, we're gonna post this video up, and of course people are watching it right now, which is great. But why don't you comment below if you're interested in these books, and we'll pick 3 people and send these books as gifts to some of the people who are watching. So if you're interested, write your name below. We'll pick 3 of them randomly, and we'll send them to you as a gift. So Alice, this is such a treat. I really appreciate this conversation. I will tell you where right now I'm not in my normal studio. I am in Chicago, Illinois, at my mother and father-in-law's house after having just a really busy week and feeling just so jittery and connected with all of my devices. And I feel like this was the conversation that I really needed today. And so regardless, I just want to thank you so much for your time, Alice. And I'm really hopeful that families in our community are able to benefit from your work directly. And I really hope that, we have the opportunity to chat with you again in the future.
May I add one thing?
Please.
Is that anyone is welcome to connect with me as well. They can message me on Facebook. They can email me. They can even call me if they
absolutely
have a question, a concern. No worries.
And maybe
And
what we can do is we can try to see if we can't add you to our like parenting community as well. So that way, like, maybe you can, see some of the conversations we're having and contribute as you see fit.
that would be wonderful. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I've thoroughly enjoyed connecting with you, and I appreciate you
Well,
asking me.
it is the privilege is all mine, and I hope and I thank you for putting up with me parroting back what I heard multiple times, and also with I guess some of maybe my elementary questions, but that's the way I learn, and so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Alice.
Thank you.